So, hi everyone.
This meeting is being recorded.
We are back again. It's me and Nelson. This Friday we are covering chapters 21 and 22, and I hope Nelson the screen sharing is okay. Hello.
Yeah, it's fine. It looks good.
Okay. So, I think like 2 weeks back we started the third section of the book. The book is still Eloquent Ruby, and the third section specifically deals with meta programming. So a few weeks back, 2 weeks back to be exact, we covered chapter 20, which was about hooks, and now we are going to cover chapters 21 and 22, which are both about method missing. So we'll start with chapter 21 and then, of course, proceed with chapter 22. So a little bit of background. Most times you have an object and the object is receiving a method. So when you call the method on that specific object, usually if it's an instance of a class, for you to get the expected output, this method should be defined inside the class. And if it turns out that that method is not defined inside the class of the specific object you're dealing with, in this case, an instance object, you're going to run into an error. And usually that error is the error handling you see, or the exception you end up seeing in either the IRB session you're working with, or in, now let's say if you're working on a Rails application, that exception is produced by the method missing method. So on page 264, the author introduces method missing, and he tells you that we have method missing and its close cousin, constant missing, and they differ in such a way that method missing is going to handle a case whereby you've called a method on an object whereby that specific method you've called is non-defined for the object. And then for constant missing, it's going to throw an exception when you're trying to reference a constant that doesn't exist. So the code on page 264, you're calling a text method on an instance of the document class. And here it's showing you that you're getting an error, with the error stating that the error is content and not text. And what this error means is that the method that you were supposed to call is content and not text, because if you were to check in the previous chapters, we don't have a text method defined inside the document class. So that is what we are trying to look at here. You have an instance of the document class, and the method, one of the methods that are defined inside the document class, one of them is the content method. So when you call a method that is not defined, you're going to get an error, and that error is, or the exception, is produced by method missing, like I've said. So the following part, I think, talks about how method missing ends up giving you the exception instead of the method you called on that specific object. And how that happens is that usually when you have a method defined inside a class, when you call that method on a given object, Ruby looks in that specific class first for that method. And if the method is defined there, you'll get the output of that method, or the final expression that is evaluated inside that method. If the method you've called is not defined within the class of the object you've called it on, then Ruby will look in the class above, or the superclass of the class that is, let me call it the mother class of the current object you're dealing with. So you have Ruby looking Ruby changing from looking inside the mother class to going to the super class. And if it doesn't find it there as well, then I think the inheritance tree continues. And if it looks all the way up the inheritance tree and Ruby still fails to find the method, that is when method missing is going to come in. And method missing will be responsible for the error you end up seeing. So it's that whole thing of you have Ruby looking inside these classes. First of all, the first class or the mother class of the object, then the super class, and then the classes that precede the super class. So yeah, I think that serves as an introduction. And inside here, this is page 265. We have a class called repeat back to me. And inside here, we have a method missing method, we define a method missing method. And when we run into an error, this method missing method we've defined inside here is going to take precedence or is going to be prioritized instead of the method missing method that is defined for all Ruby objects. Simply because when Ruby is looking for method missing, because even method missing is a method that is called when a method doesn't exist. So when Ruby is looking for which method missing method to call, this method on page 265, the method missing method will appear before in the inheritance tree, it will appear before the other method missing method, which is why you see that inside here, the author tries to customize this method missing method with, of course, a more, let me say, precise statement to tell the user of the program what happened and how he or she should solve the error he encountered. So you have a statement reading, hey, you called a method with these arguments, but there ain't no such method. And that is basically it. This is basically a more customized method missing, which tells you you call this method or a method of this name with these arguments, but the method doesn't exist. So usually you try to reevaluate and check whether you misspelled the method that you are trying to call, or you try to work on it depending on what the exception shows you. And I think when you try it out, still it's page 265, when you try to create a new instance of the repeat back to me class, and then you call hello, which is supposed to be a method defined inside the repeat back to me class, you're going to see that you're running into an error down here. And the error is showing you that you called the hello method with the arguments 1, 2, 3, but there's no such method for the repeat back to me class. Because inside the repeat back to me class, we only see one method, and that is the customized method missing method. We don't see a hello method or a goodbye method. And that is the gist when it comes to this. Nelson, is everything okay up to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way he presented it was nice because he's telling a little story. And the story is,
Yeah.
hey, I wrote some code, but then the users of this code were misusing it. And they were saying, hey, this your code doesn't work. Something's wrong. Um, but they didn't know what was wrong. And the error message that they were getting was not guiding them to fix. And so he said, well, you don't have to accept that situation, because we have this ability to override the default behavior of method
Yeah.
missing and put in some text to say, hey, this doesn't exist. We Here's a better error message for you. And then in the next section, he's gonna make some suggestions on things that other possibilities of ways that you can handle this situation where the method doesn't exist. So we can move on to handling document errors now. 266.
Yeah,
Okay. So in the first section, he's like, okay, well,
yeah.
one
The
thing that
method
you can
missing
do,
method is tailor.
yeah. So one thing that you can do is raise an exception. So if the method doesn't exist, we can raise an exception. We're gonna modify the uh, the the default message that you get. But ultimately, that's one alternative. Another alternative is that you can open up the a log file and put in. I'll go ahead and share my screen then. So the other option is that you can go ahead and put in a message in a log file. Here we're opening the file, and then we're putting in the messages that we get. Um, so those were the a few other options. Obviously, you can select what you want to happen on your own, whether you're gonna present default values or if you're gonna run some other code. Um, in addition to this, yeah, okay. So here in this section, you might even apply a little Ruby style programming customer service and try to help your user figure out which method he or she really meant. So here we're including this gem file or this gem called text. And actually, I didn't know this was a thing before I read the book, but there's something called a soundex. And soundex is an algorithm for finding words with similar sounds. Um, so in this, like the name of this tells you what it is, methods that sound like, and then the method name. So in here, we're just going to say, okay, um, they they miss obviously they mistyped the method name. So we're going to try to find what they actually meant. And uh, this soundex dot soundex name to string, what that's giving you is we're going to look through all the public methods of the class. We're going to see if any of those public methods sound like the options that we have, and then we're just going to return that method, a call to that method if we do find it. Um, if we do find a match or something similar to the method that they intended. Uh, so here we're saying they mistyped content, and now we're saying, did you mean content? The content method. So it's when you're developing that get a better user experience because they said, oh yeah, obviously I mistyped that, and yes, this is pointing me to the right method. In the next section, coping with constants. In the same way that we can use the method missing to deal with methods that don't exist, we can also deal with the situation of constants that don't exist. So constant missing is uh, is that way. It gets triggered every time you try to call a constant that doesn't exist. And then similarly, it gives you a constant name. There are no parameters here um, because this is a constant. So um, you only get one parameter, which is a constant name. And so then you can do any arbitrary set of things here to cope with the fact that the constant is missing. And here in this example on page 268, we are raising an error with the error message that says, you tried to reference the constant, and then give the constant name. There's no such constant in the document class. Great. So in the wild, um, active record is used in Ruby on Rails, and active record is usually querying. It's is a class that easily helps us query the database for certain things. So here we're sending a query to the database to try to find an author with the name of Bilbo Baggins, but what it's going to return to us is nil. So we're expecting this thing to be an author. Unfortunately, we're finding nil. So when we call bookauthor.save, it's so what this is saying is inevitably it's going to lead to something painful. And this is the error message that we get. You have a nil object where you didn't expect it. Um, this uh, this message isn't the current message that you get. I don't think, because I've never seen this message. I use Rails, um, so I think they've modified this message
Yeah.
since this book was written. Um, okay, so um, so um, it says Rails puts a cool spin on this by giving you a more helpful error message, and the error message is that you might have expected an instance of active record base. Um, the error occurred while evaluating nil.save. I mean, it's basically telling you that, hey, you were expecting some object, you got a nil, you try to call the save method on a nil object, and obviously it doesn't have it. Um, and okay, so Rake uses constant missing to provide helpful warnings about deprecated names. So here we're using constant missing to uh, to catch any of these cases when the constant name is supposed to be task. Um, it's obviously they did not prefix it with the rake module. So the task exists in the rake module. So we're gonna look in the we're gonna give the warning that we didn't find the constant where we were expecting it, which was in the top level module called task. Instead, we return a module uh, inside of the rake module called task. So it's the rake inside the rake module. There's another thing called task, and we're going to return that. Similarly to file task, we're going to return file task um, encapsulated in the rake module, and then again with file creation. So uh, you know, if someone who is using Rails is accidentally tries to use the wrong module without first prefixing it with rake, it'll automatically catch that problem and just go ahead and prefix it with the rake module. Um, okay, so this next example was pretty interesting to me actually because um, so let's read this paragraph. Perhaps the most spectacular use of constant missing lies in the way Rails uses it to load Ruby code as needed. Your active record model classes are, for example, all loaded on an as-needed basis driven by const missing. The basic idea is to include a const missing method that figures out what file to require from the name of the missing class, loads that file, and then returns the newly loaded class. Something like this. Okay, so if you're in this case, you have a constant that you were trying to reference. You get the name of that you constant, sorry, and then so you transform it a little bit. First, you transform it to a string, and then you downcase it to get the file name, and then you perform this require statement, which requires the name of the file. So it's generally going to be a gem. Um, and then we're going to raise an exception if we can't find a gem or a file with that name. And then we go ahead and return. The last thing we do is we return um, that constant. Um, okay, so staying out of trouble. Basically, it's saying none of this is really required. You can get away with garden variety Ruby error handling, and that's going to work for 99% of most of your cases. Um, and actually, when you're working with Rails, like Rails has already done this for you, and so it has implemented method missing and gives you suggestions that make sense based on your misspellings or your errors. Um, so the other thing is that the penalty for screwing up method missing and constant missing can be pretty high. Um, Ruby executes method missing anytime there's a method call that it can't locate. So if you mess up the handling of this, then you might end up with uh, unexpected behavior because you're expecting your program to stop on like um, on any method where you messed up the name. But if you're executing method missing and depending on the logic inside of your method missing, all of a sudden this thing that shouldn't work at all now does work, even though you just completely misspelled a method name. It's completely like a bogus situation. You end up running some operation that you defined in method missing, and now the logic in your program is wrong. Um, okay. And then in the next chapter, we're going to hear about more specific situations of this method missing thing with toString. Um, yeah, I think that's it for this chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to take chapter 22, or should I keep going?
No, I think you should continue. I think that whole screen sharing thing kind of messed up my internet back there.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so chapter 22, use method missing for delegation. Okay, so um, to summarize, basically, delegation is when you have already existing code that some other class is already responsible for, and you don't want to take responsibility for that code. You want to say, okay, I know I want to execute that code, so I'm just gonna call this other class um, and in order to do the operation instead of copying and pasting the code into my class or or doing something else with it. So the promise and pain of delegation. So there's some pitfalls to know with delegation. This first example highlights some of those pitfalls. So what are we doing here in this super secret document? So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to implement this behavior where we're going to only be able to see the original document for a set amount of time. And we can pass in the number of seconds that we want to see this. But like if So the timer will start the moment we um, load or create this class, and then we're going to have some sort of timeout where if we exceed the timeout, we're no longer going to be able to perform those operations. So what does this mean? It means that every time we want to perform some sort of operation, we need to check for expiration, which means we're going to check if we want the content of the document, we're going to call original document dot content, and we have to make sure that we always remember to run the check for expiration first. That sets up a situation where, hey, maybe I forget to check for the expiration, and all of a sudden, someone can read the content without those original limits. So we have to make sure we always remember to check for the expiration anytime we define a new method, which means that anytime the original document class changes, we are also going to have to remember, hey, I'm adding this method to original document, but I also have to remember to change to modify this other class. And hopefully, this is the only other class I have to remember, because if the original uh, if this style of delegation is performed in many, many different places, now when I update document, I also and add a new method to document, I also have to update every other um, delegator out there, and that relies just on my own memory. And hopefully, I have context of the entire project to know all the other classes that need to change when I change the document class. But that's not always going to happen. Uh, there's no syntax here. There's no interface here. There's nothing here helping the programmer remember which classes need to change anytime the original document class changes. So that's a big problem. Um, okay, so okay, moving on to the next section, the trouble with old-fashioned delegation. Um, okay, yeah, this is basically what I described. So we've added a new page layout here, method. We have to remember to add the new code to this class. Okay, great. So what do we do instead? Instead of manually updating the method calls each time that we want to update the original document, what we do is we implement method missing to always put in this check for expiration. And that way, we don't have to remember to add this code. Anytime we update the original document, it's automatically going to get updated here, because we're just going to uh, not define explicitly not define the content method, the page layout method, the page size method. We're not going to define any of those. We're just going to say, okay, we get the name of the method we want, and we forward that method, we send that message to the original document class. What it's going to do is we're going to call that method name with these arguments. Great. That works for the most part. Um, the problem is when that doing it this way, we already have a few methods defined in our class. These methods come from object. So this class, super secret document, by the nature of the way Ruby works, inherits from object, and object has methods already defined on it, like toString, for instance. And so if when we call toString, we're never going to actually get to this method missing class. We're never going to forward the toString method to the original document. What's going to happen is we we search for the toString method, we find it in object, and then we perform whatever the default behavior is for it. And I forget where the example is, um, but basically the we don't want to use those methods that we inherited from object. We want to be more discriminating about how we delegate. So instead of delegating everything or trying to delegate everything using the method missing um, um, method, um, so we're going to only delegate the methods that we include in this array. So we're going to explicitly forward the content method to our original document and we're going to explicitly forward the words method to our original document. Anything else, we don't forward to original document. Okay, this is where
Yeah.
we get the toString example. Staying out of trouble. So this is the default behavior of the toString method that we inherit from object. It prints out the reference. So it prints out the name of the class and its location in memory. I is that I wonder if that's how it still works. Um, I, I don't know if that's what it does. Maybe well we can test it. Um, so object dot new dot to string. Yeah, that's what it still does. Okay. So yeah, this is still valid. That's what toString does by default. Um, so instead of implicitly inheriting from object, we're going to explicitly inherit from basic object because basic object doesn't have as many methods as object does. So object, let's just so object.new.methods has a bunch of methods here. Let's count them. 60 methods come from object. So basic object new methods dot count. Whoops. Oh, can't do that because basic object doesn't even have the methods method.
Yeah, they're just included in.
So I can't even compare it. But that that's an example that illustrates how bare basic object is
Yeah.
because regular object has 60 methods on it that could possibly be causing trouble for our usage of method missing, whereas basic object is just bare bones. There's nothing there. So because we've used basic object here, we're not inheriting the toString method, which means when we hit
Yeah.
this method missing, we're going to forward toString to the original document. Okay, in the wild. Um, Yeah. So this Ruby standard library comes with a basic delegation utility in delegate.rb. So we can inherit from simple delegator and basically uh, we're going to pass in the original document to this initialize, and we're going to use simple delegator to just forward um, anything that we get from here to the or the initializer of simple delegator. Yep. So because it comes in with the standard library with just 7 lines of code, we have a fully functional wrapper for any document. So this is some text. We're going to create a document.new, and then we're going to wrap that document in document wrapper. So then any calls that we get from for document wrapper, like title, author, or content, will get forwarded to um, document. Um,
Yeah,
okay,
by the way, we have roughly 1 minute 30 seconds.
okay. I mean, that's basically it. This just gives you an
Yeah,
example of when it's used in Rails, and then
yeah.
this is the wrap up section. Um, yeah, but it's really interesting. I didn't know uh, most. I don't use method missing for anything, and I don't really use uh, meta programming in general. But it's now that I've learned it, maybe I'll find more uses for it.
Okay, I think that's it, Nelson, for today.
Okay, sounds good.